Isn't that interesting? So all right, very good. So you see that the state is an instrument of these powerful bankers on Wall Street. And they compel deregulation that allows them to engage in making money on bad loans. And then in the end they're bailed out, so it's hunky-dory for them, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, sort of bailed out, yes. But why then does it revert to the organized capitalism? If the Wall Street bankers control it, why does it revert back?
Will it revert back?
Ah, Katie.
I was going to say it reverts back to appease the proletariat.
Very good. You are all being brilliant theorists here. Very good. You're thinking even though it's 4:30 in the afternoon. Yeah. In communism, 4:30 in the afternoon is a time for what? Criticism. Building sociology. Yeah. Anyway, yes. So there may be, we haven't got a good theory already and we're going beyond Marx and Engels. Why does the state do what it does? Some people argue the state does what it does because it is actually responsive to class struggle. So indeed, this reversion back to organized capitalism may be precisely because of the fear of what will happen if capitalism does not get hold of these banks. Basically, there will be foreclosures all over the country. And that could lead to, well, first of all, the Republicans will not get into power for the next 2 decades, but leaving party politics aside, well, the state will engender a lot of opposition. And he wants to contain that opposition. That's an interesting, you see, we're going way beyond because, of course, Marx and Engels didn't get to here. And we've gone beyond here to here, and now we're wondering indeed whether this competitive capitalism in which we find ourselves now globally is actually going to revert back to a whole new form of organized capitalism. Fascinating question beyond this course. Oh. But this course inspires great questions because we're dealing with great theory. Yes. All right. Any other questions? Yes. Anders.
Why couldn't this happen later?
Why couldn't what happen later?
Communism.
Aha! Well, we'll see next time that Marx doesn't put the time on it. And he says, well, you never know. All we know is that the contradictions haven't matured. So it could still happen. Indeed, it could still happen. And in fact, one might think that the world, and this is Simeon's point again, the world today, as we know it, I mean the globe today is very much, perhaps the first time in history, approximates to the conditions Marx and Engels laid down in the Communist Manifesto. But one ingredient is missing. Anders, one ingredient is missing that is so present in the Communist Manifesto to which we are now going to pay attention. The union of the working class. The working class, we cannot talk about, yes, in places, in Norway, you've got unionization for 90% of the labor force, Sweden, something similar. But, basically it's not a revolutionary working class, with all due respect to Norway. That we don't have revolutionary working classes in countries, and we have very great difficulty in building cross-national alliances of working class. So there's no sort of world proletariat, as Marx anticipated. He has a brilliant analysis in the Communist Manifesto, indeed, of the ways in which capitalism generates crises once again. And he has a great theory of this, but it happens to be wrong. Kristen.
I was just going to ask for confirmation on something you said. Is it that working classes won't unite in a state? Is it that it's unlikely or impossible or just super improbable?
Let us see what Marx says on this question of class struggle. And then we'll see if there's an answer there. Okay? Neil.
Can you argue that workers could potentially become revolutionary if this cycle of competitive capitalism to organized capitalism, if organized capitalism at some point doesn't work, then couldn't you argue that in which case the workers will see that the state can't do anything about it?
Right, you're back to Engels. You remember how Engels thought? He said, here's the working class. The working class looks this way and sees incompetent capitalists. Looks this way and sees coupon clippers, capitalists doing be-all, right? So that leads, in Engels' formulation, for the workers to say, we must seize state power. But that's a Bob's your uncle theory of working class. The working class can't just immaculate conception organize itself collectively. It's a stage-like process. And we have to see under what conditions it might actually organize itself. I don't think Marx and Engels thought you can just, one day they are atomized, fragmented, divided, and the next day they're unified and seize state power. It is a process. We have got to see what this process is. Right? So let us see what this process is. It's all in the Communist Manifesto. That is where Marx has his theory, or Marx and Engels have their theory of class struggle. What is the opening line in the Communist Manifesto? History is the history of... Wow, that's brilliant. If you all say it, it must be true. History is the history of class struggle. We've had history, it's the third type of history we've got. We've had history as the succession of different modes of production. We've had history as the dynamics of an individual mode of production, capitalism. And now we have history as the history of class struggle. And that class struggle is crucial in driving what? It explains how you move from one mode of production to another mode of production. Okay? So, history is the history of class struggle. And what is the end? Page 483. What happens? What is the class that engages? What are the classes that engage in struggle under capitalism? They are the chain? The proletariat and the capitalist class. And the proletariat becomes a revolutionary class. And what Marx says on page 483, is it 483? Shoot, where am I? You're throwing me off here. Okay, 483, that's right. I love this passage because it's just wrong. 483. No. The great theories are the wrong theories. If you're always right, very boring. The really great theorist is the theorist who is brilliantly wrong, like Smith, like Marx, like Fanon, like Durkheim. Weber didn't, well, you had, Weber was very careful not to be wrong. 483, before the section number 2. 2, 4, 6, 8 lines from the bottom. Sienna, are you there?
The advanced industry?
Yes. Loud and clear.
The advanced industry. The involuntary promoter is the bourgeoisie.
The advance of industry whose involuntary promoter is the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie, as an involuntary promoter, is because of competition. They engage in competition, they can't avoid competition, they've got to compete, and therefore they push the development of the forces of production forward. Go on.
Replaces the isolation of the laborers.
It is this competition that replaces the isolation of laborers, atomized working class, by? Due to competition, by?
By the revolutionary combination.
By their revolutionary combination. From atomized, competing workers, they become unified, revolutionary working class.
Due to association. The development of modern industry, therefore.
This is too important. The development of modern industry, therefore,
cuts from under its feet.
Cuts from under its feet.
The very foundation.
The very foundation, you're getting it now.
On which the.
It's a suspense now. On which the
bourgeoisie produces and appropriates products. What the bourgeoisie therefore produces, above all, is its own grave diggers. The falls and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable.
What the bourgeoisie does above all, is create its own grave diggers. The bourgeoisie creates involuntarily a revolutionary class that overthrows capitalism. It creates its own grave diggers. That must be a line written by Marx. Engels couldn't have done it. They create their own grave diggers. They are digging away. That's when they're competing. They're digging away, and then they bury themselves, or are buried by the revolutionary working class. Yeah. Great. Now, between page 473 and 483, there is an argument as to why it is that the bourgeoisie creates its own gravediggers. So what is the argument? And the argument is to be found, essentially, at its core, will be found on pages 479 to 481. What is the argument? What is the argument? What is the argument? It's a two-step argument. Anybody want to summarize what Marx and Engels say between 479 and 481? Sienna.
Maybe that by socialization of labor, they have de-skilled their laborers.
Brilliant.
Is one, and then I think the other one is that they've alienated the rest of the world.
You know, there's a rule in this class, and the rule in this class is you never use the word alienation. Oh. It's much too long.
Okay.
So, but it's a nice word, I know. So, what would you say instead of alienation?
They push out everybody who is not a major capitalist.
Yes. Push out. Expel from the workplace, yes. Okay, there is a process of de-skilling that Marx and Engels talk about on page 479, right? 479, yes. If you look down that page, 479, if you start on page 478, the last line, where Marx and Engels say, in proportion as the bourgeoisie, i.e. capital, is developed, in the same proportion the proletariat, the modern working class, developed, a class of labourers who live only so long as they find work, and who find work only so long as their labour increases capital. That is the idea of free labour, but it is the idea of dependence. Labour is a dependence of labour on capital. Dependence on capital. Okay, that's point number 1. Point number 2, down that page 480. What's point number 2? Well, point number 2 is in the next paragraph. The next paragraph says, owing to the extensive use of machinery and to division of labour, the work of the proletarian has lost all individual character and consequently all charm for the workman. He becomes an appendage of the machine, and it is only the most simple and most monotonous and most easily acquired knack that is required of him. That is a process of simplification, de-skilling, degradation. Yes. What next? Reading down the same page. Next paragraph. Modern industry has converted the little workshop of the patriarchal master into the great factory of the industrial capitalist. Masses of labourers crowded into the factory are organised like soldiers. As privates of the industrial army, they are placed under the command of a perfect hierarchy of officers and sergeants. Not only are they slaves of the bourgeois class, but of course that's metaphorically because they're not really slaves, they are wage labourers. We have to correct. He gets a bit, out of control with his vocabulary here. Not only are they slaves of the bourgeois class and of the bourgeois state, they are daily and hourly enslaved by the machine, by the overlooker, and above all by the individual bourgeois manufacturer himself. The more openly this, Sienna, what's the word? Despotism proclaims gain to be its end and aim. The more petty, the more hateful, the more embittering it is. So that's the next point, despotism. And then the next paragraph talks about what? Juliana.
Sorry, reading ahead.
You were reading ahead. You were missing the...
Okay,
Anybody, what's the next paragraph? Come on, I can't do everything for you.
I have it.
You have it.
So, basically the workers would become objects into labor.
The less the skill and exertion of strength implied in manual labor. In other words, the more modern industry becomes developed, the more is labor of men superseded by that of women. Differences of age and sex have no longer any distinctive social validity for the working class. All are instruments of labor, more or less expensive to use according to their age and sex. What is he saying in that paragraph, essentially?
It doesn't matter what they, I just want to clear it matters what they do labor.
Right, the homogenization of the working class. Homogenization. Very good. And one last thing is the last paragraph on the page. The lower strata of the middle class, the small tradespeople, shopkeepers and retired tradesmen generally, and handicraftsmen and peasants, all these sink gradually into the proletariat, etc. We've heard all that before. So what happens is there is... Lauren! Yes! What happens? There is a... Yes, we call it Thank you. Polarization. Rich and poor, wealthy and impoverished, capitalist and workers. And these are economic conditions. This is the material conditions of the working class, and we call it in Marxian language, class in itself. That is to say, this is the objective circumstances of the working class. Objective circumstances of the working class. Objective conditions. Degradation, de-skilling, dependence, despotism, homogenization. That is the objective conditions. And Marx wants to make an argument that class in itself becomes a class. Very good. Class for itself. That is to say, it becomes a collective actor fighting for its interests. A class for itself. Right? A class mobilized and organized to pursue its interests. And what do Marx and Engels have to say about that? Well, if you want to know, they say all this on page 480 to 481. Look. So what happens? There are 3 stages of the development of class struggle. Do you know what they are? What's the first stage? Anybody been reading on page 480? Well, trade unions. Well, that turns out to be the second stage. Rosa.
Scattered everywhere.
Very good. They have these scattered. You want to read it out for us?
At this stage, the laborers still form an incoherent mass scattered over the whole country and broken up by their mutual competition. If anywhere they unite to form more compact bodies, this not yet the consequence of their own active union, but of the union of the bourgeoisie, which class, in order to attain its own political ends, is compelled to set the whole proletariat in motion, and is moreover yet for a time able to do so. Right, very good. But in fact, if we look at the previous paragraph, it says a bit more clearly what's going on. There, Siana. The proletariat. The new paragraph in 480.
The proletariat goes through various stages of development. With its birth begins to struggle with bourgeoisie. At first, the contest is carried on by individual laborers, then by the work people of the factory, then by the operatives of one trade in one locality against the individual bourgeois.
Okay. Very good. Scattered struggles, usually against a single capitalist. Against single capitalists. That's the first stage. The workers fight to defend their interests when capitalists overwork them, don't pay their wages, subject to their cruel, despotic rule, fire them arbitrarily. So workers try and struggle. So that's the first stage. The second stage of the development of a class for itself is what? Well, if you look down in the bottom of the last paragraph on that page, we see, let me do the reading, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 lines on the bottom of page 480. There, Marx and Engels say the growing competition among the bourgeois, remember, you've heard that one before, the growing competition among the bourgeois and the resulting commercial crisis, heard that one before, make the wages of the workers ever more fluctuating. The unceasing improvement of machinery ever more rapidly developing makes the workers' livelihood more and more precarious. You know, there's a whole new word in modern sociology. It comes from France like all new words. It's called a precariat. That is the precarious proletariat. People are arguing today that around the world, including this country, the working